Welcome to Lunch with Tech Leaders, where we have engaging conversations about software development and cloud engineering with industry leaders and subject matter experts. These episodes are created by the Great Lakes Tech Leaders, an online community of technology practitioners. Please come join the conversation by visiting gltl.rbn.ai. Again, that's gltl.rbn.ai. Now strap in, because we're deploying to production in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of Lunch with Tech Leaders. My name is Ray Welker. I'm a cloud solutions engineer with Right Brain Networks, and I'll be your host today. Joining me today, as always, is software and data consultant Tom Kowalski. Say hi, Tom.
Hello.
And last but not least, we have our business technology consultant, Joe Coleman.
Thank you so much for that excellent intro there, Ray. As always, if you listeners have any questions or any topic you'd like us to cover and touch on, just throw it there in the chat, and I'll be sure to interject where I can. So thank you so much, Ray.
Also with us today, we have a guest who is one of my coworkers, Todd Meter. Would you mind saying hi?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Todd Meter, Cloud Solutions Engineer at Right Brain.
All right, and for today, we want to talk about spending in AWS and provide some cost optimization tips. So we have a lot to cover today. It's definitely a broad topic, so grab your lunch and buckle up. So yeah, Tom, spending, right? We were just talking about this a little bit yesterday over Discord. So it's a near and dear topic to your heart, right?
Yeah, I've been dealing with a lot lately. Not so much in the past, but yeah, I've been working with some customers lately that have a lot more going on in their AWS accounts, and where the spending, the cost control really matters, right? Just a minor configuration change that's not set properly, and it's tens of thousands of dollars that a month. So yeah,
that's
can really matter.
The cost of gaining experience, right? I always find trying to optimize costs is always a journey. You learn more as you grow and learn more about AWS. You find better ways to do things, and hopefully the goal is to reduce what you're spending overall, I think. But
yeah, and another thing too I've learned, it's you got to think about it up front. Because even if you're not that big right now, you don't want to over-engineer, but you do want to think about it, right? If this is going to grow to terabytes or petabytes or whatever, am I setting this up, the indexing properly, right? To so that it does work, so that it will scale if it does get that big. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's certainly an important thing to consider for any size business, and any stage of where your product may be. Obviously, doing things optimally up front is going to pay dividends and save you some pain and money in the long run. But there's never a better time to start than now.
I like what Grace said about it being a journey. Like it's something you should always be working. You reach way back in time. My first job was at a fast food chain where the expression was, if you've got time to lean, you've got time to clean. You're just kind of kicking around your AWS account and you don't know what you should be doing today. Maybe take a look at where you can optimize some cost. There's always a place to find wasteful spend.
Yeah, like security, right? There's always something that you can be doing, right? And yeah, I completely agree with that.
So, I guess in your guys' experience, what are some cost optimization tips that you've employed, while you've been with clients or, within your own organizations or your own AWS accounts? I can start. Well, go ahead, Todd. You had something?
Well, I think one thing that I always like to call out is that AWS gives you a lot of tools you can use to track and control your spend. And some of those are not enabled out of the box. And it's pretty easy to just go in and turn those on and start using them. I think Trusted Advisor is a good place to start. I think it gives you a lot of good cost optimization tips. It'll find things like idle RDS instances or part DIP, elastic IPs. They're just costing you money, and that's just wasteful spend. Things like that. That's a good place to start. And getting into the billing console, getting comfortable with Cost Explorer.
Definitely. I feel like getting the cost optimization report also set up is generally a really good kind of first step. I've never seen a more detailed report in my life of how money is being spent in AWS.
It can be a little overwhelming. That
definitely
one, right? I don't know if you want to start there, but or, if you're getting your feet wet, maybe like the billing dashboard is, I think, a little more easier to follow. But yeah, if you want to, that is the most detailed report I think I've ever seen in my life too. To break down every little thing.
Yeah, a coworker and I tried to set up some automations around that and do some data interpolation in order to provide some reports, but we won't get into that in this episode. Yeah. But yeah, definitely, like, AWS offers a lot of native tools to understand and manage your costs and resources. There's a lot of native products that are just there up front. They're not going to cost you any additional money to leverage, and they just provide some real important data. You mentioned the one there, Trusted Advisor. There's the AWS Cost Explorer. I think there's AWS budgets as well. So that kind of, they're all there and allow for you to leverage them and, create detailed reports and notifications about, whatever you're trying to track, whether it be a certain dollar amount, you don't want to exceed. AWS budgets is there to notify you if you're getting close to that threshold. Or Cost Explorer is there for, optimizing your current utilization. There's a lot of great tools there, and there's third-party tools as well. I haven't personally used a lot of third-party tools myself. Kind of curious if either of you guys have.
Yeah, we've used Cloud Checker. That's so I'm working with a managed service provider right now, and it just makes it look a lot nicer for our customers to view their bills in a nice, concise way, and also present that to them in like a little portal and everything that they can view without having to know too much knowledge about AWS and the permissions and all of that. So that's what I'm a little familiar with. It's kind of nice for what we use it for. Yeah.
Definitely. I know.
I've poked around in Cloud Checker a little bit. Yeah, that's a nice place to have a lot. If you're managing a lot of accounts for clients, that's a good place to have a central place to see a lot of that information.
Yeah. One of the members in our community mentioned Vantage.io as being a pretty useful tool in his opinion. And I believe, we have other members as well, vetting Cloud Checker as well as a great, tool for, providing reports to clients. I've used Cloud Health, which is a similar one, an AWS partnered one, but that's the only other one I've had experience in. And generally, I think they're very useful tools. But there are the AWS native ones that I primarily use, and a lot of them are included. So, yeah, there's a lot of tooling out there that could provide you some value by identifying where money's going in your account. How about some like strategies, like overall strategies you guys use to identify and, like when it comes to placing instances into, proper instance sizes, or even, the proper types such as like on demand, or whether it's going to be reserved or spot, and down to, I don't know, I'd kind of like to even talk about like the idea of moving to the cloud. I feel like there's a misconception that the cloud is generally cheaper and going to save you money. I think that's an important thing we should probably touch on during this. But yeah, how about like some of the specifics? What are your guys' tips for identifying proper sizes for your workloads, and or even the proper types that they should run on, whether it's an on-demand or reserved, so forth?
I think you have to understand the application and how it's running. It's kind of hard to just jump in and say, yeah, we're gonna need this reserved, or use these savings plans. I think you kind of have to run, on demand for a bit and understand the workload. Whether you're migrating or it's new or and testing the different instance types to see, how the application runs. Um, so yeah, a strategy is I would say, have split the traffic, try different instance type when we were talking about compute. Um, yeah, do you have any strategies on that side, Todd?
No, I think that's right. I would usually start in on demand until I had a real good sense of the compute that was being used, and always try to, if you see that your utilization is staying under like 30%, then that's really a good sign that you've overutilized.
Yeah, I would
Definitely.
say a best strategy that I've seen isn't necessarily, like a tool for identifying it. The best strategy is the ownership, right, of the application and who owns the cost. That's usually the best driver of actually getting to it, right? Because sometimes you'll have like a team that owns infrastructure or whatever in the cost, and it's it's always like a back and forth, right? Of yeah, you can make these changes and optimize, but there usually has to be changes done to the application itself to utilize the different benefits of that AWS has that can make things cheaper in a variety of ways, whether it's a different instance type that different memory or processor. So putting that ownership on the team itself, I see is a lot better driver for costs and exploring those options and making those changes. And when I say team, I'm saying like the product team, owning it end to end. The what DevOps used to be, right? Putting, the ownership of the operations, fully end to end security cost of the application that they're running is usually that I've seen that has the best results of driving down costs and actually getting to change. So yeah, I know it's not like a tool and a specific strategy, but that's the win in my book when you make that happen and the team, sees, oh, we made this change and it's costing us more, and they're prioritizing those costs right up along with the features and fixes that they're doing. That's the biggest driver for cost optimization that I've seen.
And
I
I
think
think
that falls.
that kind of, I'm sorry, right? I just wanted to
Go ahead.
say that I think that kind of leads really neatly into how you would track that, how you can track that ownership, which is we're all tagging owners on all our resources, I'm sure. But tags are really important. In this instance too, you can enable what's called cost allocation tags. So since we're all already tagging our resources with owners, we can enable the owner tag as a cost allocation tag, and that makes it really easy to sort that spend by those different owners in your Cost Explorer.
Yeah. And making it visible and transparent what the costs are, right? When one team sees that, their costs are jumping up, relative to like another team, it kind of makes that like, competition, right? When it's visible to the whole company. So it's, if it allows it, I highly recommend making, the cost transparent, within your organization and what teams are spending. And tags make it very, very easy to do so. So yeah.
Definitely make it visible. A lot of companies are kind of afraid to do that, to have their employees seeing the spend. But if you're a developer in there spinning up instances, there you ought to be able to have a easy way to know what you're spending.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, like oftentimes I feel like costs, focus on costs is driven downwards, like from, managers down to teams, down to, product owners themselves. But I think it's certainly something that everyone should keep in mind. You don't want to over provision your instance as well. So if you are the developer choosing a specific or the infrastructure engineer choosing a specific instance size, I think you should have data-driven metrics. Do I need, this 4x large instance, for example, running an RDS if we're only, we can provide the same compute and performance on like a X large, for example. That's just wasted spend. And something that, I think as, a product owner, you should be aware of. So, I know you can create, like through budgets, you can create notifications based off of, certain tags. So notifying those individuals of their usage, I think that's a really useful strategy. And I think that all comes down to, tagging, like you guys mentioned, by having, product owners as, or team ownership on certain resources and notifying said teams of what they're utilizing. Just kind of keeps your eye out there, because it is always an evolving process of, we want to better the app and probably make it more performant, but also reduce cost. I wanted to jump back to your original point there, Tom, but I definitely agree that on-demand instances are usually the best starting location. I know Cost Explorer itself will recommend reserved instances for services that are using on-demand over a given time to try to save you money.
Yeah.
And those those types of services that offer reserved instances are EC2, ECS, RDS, Dynamo itself, and Elasticache. I believe there may be some other services as well that they're bringing it to, but that's typically after some period of time where you can actually, forecast that we're going to have a steady workload on this instance that, you may want to put an RI out there for.
Yeah, and something else that allows, that better flexibility is the savings plan. So if it's, compute that you're doing, you might want to look into that before jumping into reserving specific instances. That the savings plan really, allows you to be very flexible.
Hey there, guys. We actually got a couple interesting questions here. It was just you were pretty deep in the weeds there, so I didn't want to interrupt the flow. But one of them, we got a user asked, what would the cost optimization technique be for his Lambdas? He has 400 Lambdas running with provisioned concurrency.
It comes down to you can't just answer that out of the box, right? It comes down to the architecture, the application, right? How the clients are interacting with it. Why do you need provision concurrency? It's usually usually should only be reserved if you're migrating an application to Lambda. If it's out of the box, right, it's probably not architected properly if you have to use provision concurrency for a new application. So there's a lot of, it depends on the architecture there, I'd say.
Yeah, my biggest red flag there is that it's something that's constantly provisioned, which is maybe an anti-pattern for something that's containerized or, serverless. So I would mostly recommend some architectural, changes as well, or in review at least of how or why we're using that service first.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And we had another one. Seen some recent headlines where companies with large hosting footprints in the cloud are migrating back to on-prem data centers. Companies are claiming that it's a cost savings as a primary driver for this. Is this a trend in the industry, or are these just some one-off companies trying to relive the old glory days?
I think
Go.
Yeah, I
ahead,
think it
Tom.
depends, right? And the architectural decisions, you want to, as AWS says, offload your undifferentiated heavy lifting, and focus on your core business. And you want to use the abstraction that is right for you and your workload, whether it's cost, compliance, or whatever. I'm a huge fan of serverless if you can, and then slowly working down. But once you're a big enough company and you're spending billions of dollars, tens or more billions of dollars, then it might make sense to run on-prem. Or if you already have the infrastructure, it's not something you care about, that you don't need highly available. You're just running some workloads, and you already have the infrastructure there. It might make sense to run some workloads on-prem, but it's a lot of depends.
I would certainly say I'm a strong proponent of using cloud hosted services in general and their infrastructure, because typically the value of, say, AWS it extends beyond any dollar figure necessarily that you can offer, because there's typically there's something called the cloud value framework, which is a 3-pillar methodology, which involves staff productivity, your operational resilience, and business agility. And those kind of help you realize cost savings by leaning into these pillars. They typically result in a greater overall cost savings than, whatever you're initially trying to focus on, being like the dollar amount of moving to AWS.
Yeah, I've
You
seen
have
some
to think of, go ahead.
just going off that, I've seen headlines that are like, "Oh, Dell server rack costs this, right? And I'm paying this in Amazon." It's like that's not one for one. So yeah.
No. And I mean, like, yeah, you have to think of the cost of a data center. Like, are you actually saving money by moving back to an on-prem? You have to pay for a co-location. You might have to pay for your ISP, a backup ISP. You have to pay for backup power. You have to pay for the physical servers. You have to pay for the operational costs, the maintenance that it takes, the engineer there, racking and unracking servers.
Require that you have multiple data centers.
Right. You have that aspect to it as well. There's a lot of factors that I don't think always get fully realized when making that an analysis. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so you have to I guess understand the business value of why they're maybe trying to move back to on.
Yeah, and a lot of you read in the news, a lot of sensational headline too, right? Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. The headline's there to capture me and draw me in, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds wild for me as the biz dev guy. I'm like, wait, why would you go back to on-prem? Stop it. Stop. You already know the cloud's where things need to be. What is wrong with you? We did have
I don't know how many people listening have actually lifted a Sun server, but they're heavy, guys.
It sounds very heavy. I got a couple interesting notes here from Adam. He said some KPIs worth noting when talking about hosting costs. Track your hosting costs per account, i.e. the customers. Your cloud spend might be skyrocketing, but if your hosting cost per account is going down, you have a robust infrastructure that is optimized for scaling. He said another KPI is to look at your revenue growth versus your cloud hosting spend. If your cloud hosting spend is outpacing the revenue growth of your company, there's definitely a cause for concern.
Yeah, I definitely think those are some very important points to consider when maybe trying to, discuss navigating, making that switch. But I mean, I think that kind of, leans into the whole topic of, is AWS actually cheaper than on-prem? Like, I think that's a misconception overall. If you just want to move your workload to AWS, you're probably going to spend the same, if not similar, the same, if not a little bit more than you would by operating, your on-prem infrastructure, but in the cloud, if you just kind of lift and shift. You're really going to optimize it.
The other thing too is it enables for so much more. So sometimes it will cost more because now you have a lot better security, a lot better high availability that you don't usually see. Even when going from like EC2s to serverless, you may not have that redundancy that you're seeing with your EC2s that you get by going to a higher abstraction, some form of serverless.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people view it as a set it and forget it mentality, but yeah, if you are shifting your architecture around and moving from something that's stateful to stateless, you're going to have some challenges along the way, and there may be some cost savings along the way of changing it, but by, reducing the overall uptime of your resources. But I think you still need to weigh whether or not your change is going to meet the performance needs that you're aiming for, and if that cost change is worth it. There's definitely a conversation there that needs to be had. But
yeah, just to clarify what I was saying back there, right, of how it's a little different in how you can. So you want to make your production, or your staging and development accounts as close as you can to production. If you're on-prem, that's very hard to do. But if you're moving up the stack, cloud, EC2s, it makes it a lot easier. And you might spend more money because now you do have a more production like development environment. So that's what I'm saying, like those little hidden costs that now it enables you to do those things very easily when on-prem you couldn't. So sometimes you'll see that where those costs kind of jump up because I can add that little bit of, better development experience, better security that I had versus on-prem. Yeah.
Definitely. I think that would lean into overall providing a better product. If you're able
Yeah.
to have multiple environments, you're getting bugs out of the way earlier on in the pipeline rather than, experiencing them in production.
Yeah.
Those environments are disposable, right? Like as easy as I can build things, I can tear them down. And I mean, with AWS, you're only paying while you're using. It's a pay-as-you-go model. So
Yeah. Like when we were on-prem, we didn't have DR, on the other side of the country. But now, we went to the cloud and we have that option. It costs us a little bit more money, but that wasn't even an option when we were on-prem.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, and AWS provides all the tooling to automate that for you. Do I want to just shut this down at a given time? Yeah, nobody's using dev after 5 p.m., for example. Let's just completely shut it down and it can go away. Or I can just destroy it all if its infrastructure is code. Take a backup if we need it and completely wipe it out. That's definitely the power that the cloud offers you, I think, outweighs, operating back on-prem.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah. So I guess another thing, excuse me. So like some real life challenges that we've experienced, like what have you seen out there, Tom? Have you seen anything out there that you needed to, put your expertise towards to help reduce costs on something or better optimize it?
Yeah. So what I've been dealing with most recently is around data and S3. I've never got to play around, a few terabytes here and there, but working with customers that have hundreds of terabytes, the data and how that's the storage tiers that are used in S3 really matter, and how they're being accessed. So going back to what I said, you want to, even if you're not that big, you want to think about it, because once you grow there, and let's say Athena is great and I've been using it a lot, but if you don't have proper partitioning, it can cost a lot of money. So you want to think about that up front. How are you partitioning that data in S3? So you don't shoot yourself in the foot down the road and it costs thousands of dollars to run a query, versus pennies if it's properly partitioned. So I would definitely think about that, and how you're doing that, what your access patterns could be in the future. And then also definitely leveraging the different storage tiers, right? They have the fancy lifecycle transitions that you can do with S3. So yeah, you're never accessing data that's older than a few months, and pushing that to something cheaper, whether it's infrequent access or even Glacier. And that can save a lot of money. Even working with customers, it costs us thousands of dollars to transition it sometimes, but that costs over time. They have to store it for so long for compliance reasons. Outweighed that initial cost of transferring, because it does cost to transfer between the storage tiers, depending on how many objects, not how much data is in there, but how many objects you have. So yeah, I had a lot of fun, trying to figure out the cost optimization of the data, right, and moving that around S3. That's something that I've been in. So yeah, my advice is to think about, even if you don't have a lot of data, think about those access patterns in the future, and setting that up so for success if it does get big.
yeah, Tom, those transfer rates are really tricky. They can bite
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
We decided to move a bunch of stuff into Glacier all at once.
Yep. It might make sense for you to re-index it before it goes into Glacier, right? To zip it up into different structures, objects. Yeah, it can be tricky. But at least in the beginning, at least think about how it might be done. You don't want to over-engineer and spend hundreds of engineering hours trying to figure it out. But there's little things that you can do to think about how it might be accessed in the future to really save yourself down the road.
Speaking of data, I think it is interesting. It was, I think in late 2021, they introduced intelligent tiering to S3, and that was a way between moving between the different access frequencies based on usage. And I know that there was no transfer fee other than if it was moved to Glacier. Is my understanding of that. But yeah, that kind of helps you place certain objects into the appropriate access frequency and automatically, which is quite nice. Yeah, I had a similar one, but it was kind of justifying the cost of moving a relatively small EFS volume to, or EFS file system to a burst, or from burstable throughput into an elastic throughput. And I just thought it was very interesting because the overall cost of moving that it's based off of your read and your write gigabits or gigabytes per month, and and it was negligible. It was operating at bursting originally, and that wasn't meeting their needs as they were having some very spiky workloads. And as soon as we moved it to Elastic, it cost like about $50 extra a month for a production file system, but it was a night and day difference in the performance that they received, just because they had more provisioned throughput, and they weren't relying on these burstful credits. Just something that, again, wasn't optimized correctly from the start. That really could have been better designed, I would say.
Yeah, and going back to the journey, right? It's always changing, right? AWS is always coming out with different things. So yeah, you always got to be on the lookout, and what can benefit you and where you're at and where you're going.
Definitely. Well, we are getting close to time. So does anybody have any last comments or questions that they want to get in?
I just want to throw out two of my favorite things. CloudWatch logs can get really expensive. You're logging a lot of stuff to those versus just sending it to an S3 bucket. And the Elastic IPs, which falls under the EC2 other category. It's real easy to forget those, and if you only get charged for them if they're sitting there idle. You don't get charged while you're using them. So clean those EIPs up.
That's an excellent takeaway.
Yeah. I would just like to reiterate that that the best strategy that I've seen is making that the team responsible for the costs, right, of the applications they're running. It never works out when it's a separate infrastructure department that's in charge of costs. Putting the costs on the teams themselves that are running and owning those applications. That's my biggest takeaway. That's the biggest driver for cost change that I've seen.
Yeah, definitely an excellent takeaway. With that though, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our listeners for tuning in today for this episode of Lunch with Tech Leaders. We hope you found the conversation informative and valuable. And we'd love to again have you next week, where Derek Youngie is going to discuss GitHub action runners on Kubernetes. Certainly interested in what he has to say then. And as always, the episode will feature some expert guests and interactive conversations. So be sure to stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.